everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Latest Thread, where we are going to be talking about lines as texture in your quilting. And I think they're really useful because I think usually when we talk about texture, it's like fills a lot of the time. And so, I don't know, even I know myself, most of the fills are like swirly, roundish kind of things. And so the lines are nice if you need to have a change in texture because they're so different.
Mm-hmm. And you come in your fingernails across them.
That's the best kind that you need to feel it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are you really even a quilter if you don't run your hand across like feathers and texture and stuff?
Well,
after you,
I always say that. I'm like, let me see your quilt, and I'm feeling it with my fingers. I'm like, let me see your quilt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I actually don't do that at all.
Really?
I really don't. I like to see the texture, especially, when the different light hits it, then you can really see the texture, or even when you roll it, or even if you try taking pictures and you take it from different angles. Mm-hmm. But I honestly can say I have never done that where I just felt it. Oh. I guess I'm not a quilter.
I was going to say, I asked the question, now what?
No. I have to feel it with my fingertips to see it.
Yeah. Well, you're not very a tactile person to begin with, then maybe that would be different. But like, I don't know, me and Karen are touchy-feely.
Yeah, I am not right? that.
So we want to touch we hug our, that's the way we hug our quilts, I guess.
Well, we all know I'm not a hugger, so yeah. I'm a visual person.
Ava Cactus Birch.
All right.
But you are a fabulous quilter still.
Yes. Thank you.
So, do you want me to share some pictures?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Oh, one sec. Let me open up the first one here. It's always good when I'm prepared.
Wait, that's my line. I'm not prepared.
I was prepared though, like 5 minutes ago. All right, here we are. There it is. Okay.
Okay, and this is what I was talking about a second ago. Sometimes I try to take pictures, from certain angles. And this one, it's kind of hard to see, whereas I find that you can create texture just by using straight lines when they go in different directions, and you also change the spacing of your lines. Mm-hmm. That creates, not only visually the texture, but yeah, if you were feeling it, if you were inclined to do so, then you can feel the difference, between the different size spacing.
I can hear my fingers on that red spot right now. Sorry.
You can go to the next one, Sharon.
Okay.
Was that the next one? Oh, no. Okay, here again, this is just a small sample, but I think Jody mentioned earlier, your fills are usually roundish, swirly-ish, in this case, the pebbles. And I find that I really like combining the lines with the round, and you have the round shape in the feathers. So using the straight lines, essentially I just echoed around those little blocks. It definitely creates a lot of texture.
It's that contrast of the straight and the soft round. Yeah.
Yeah. And again here, just very simple straight lines, but by adding a different element in there, as in the circles, adds the movement. So you have the contrast between the movement of the circles and, with the lines. So again, I like, seeing something like that. Plus it breaks up the space of your area. And here again, if you can zoom in just a smidgen.
Sure can.
You know, here you see what I was talking about earlier, you know, with the spacing. But in this case, it's also the direction of how the direction changes of the lines. And so it creates a really nice visual texture, I think. You know, it's almost like an illusion in the background. And so even though it's very simple quilting with just literally the lines, you see a little bit then in the green square, you know, that appears different again because the direction of the lines changed again. So just by changing the spacing and the direction, you can create really nice texture.
And I like the in the Hastur triangles. So you've got the orange and white ones and you've got the black and white ones, how you just use the seam to be your, you know, so as an inspiration of like, hey, I'm going to break up the lines right here. And I guess I'm sometimes a little bit lazy where if I don't have to mark and I can use some of the seams inside the piecing to help me figure out how I'm going to break up the design. And I like it done there.
In this particular quilt, because, well, I marked the whole quilt top before I quilted it. Every line was marked because I know Jody can relate, you know, because sometimes, especially in a larger quilt, if you trust your ruler, even if you go off a seam, like I did, you know, as you go through the quilt, all of a sudden you're off. So in this particular instance, every line was marked.
Mm-hmm. It turned out great.
Thank you. And this is yet another example of how, you know, it's lines, even though there's literally just lines in the body of the quilt, but because of how it was pieced and also the colors that she used in the quilt, you know, I think it created the texture just the same. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you can see it more on some of the lighter fabrics and a little less on some of the darker ones. And so
it visually appears different because of the pieces of the fabric colors.
Wow. And you also have like, you know, because of spiral, every corner, you know, it changes direction every line. So it kind of gives you that cool.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I love quilting like that because it's really mindless. And in this case, I didn't mark, you know, the lines because the diamonds were not that ginormous. So I trusted myself to keep it in line the way they're supposed to. So it's really mindless quilting because just when you look at the piecing, if you've quilted for a long time, like we all have, you can already see what it's going to do, you know. So
yeah,
I'd have to at least mark the crosshairs through the diamond because I'd be missing that point every turn.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But that's just us, because I think an average person, you know what I mean? If you did it for somebody, when they look at it, they're not going to notice that. But we did it, and then you know.
Yeah, that one's 1/8 of an inch off.
Mm-hmm.
But especially you're right, though.
Fabric. Sorry, go ahead.
Because especially on the solid fabrics, if you're not careful, you do definitely see it, you know, and generally you would only do, I would imagine, do that type of quilting on a solid or predominantly solid fabrics to really
imagine on a
effect.
So. Yeah, but I think like for me, you know, I think I use lines a lot on prints though, because like when it's a busy fabric, but you need something there,
right,
and you know you're not going to see it. The lines are great because then at least you see a different texture in the right light. So almost like a meander to me, because meander's kind of like, I don't know, like
it's a
you don't notice
shape.
it.
Yeah, it's a simple shape.
Mm-hmm.
And on this sample here, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's simple ruler work, but because of how the blocks come together, the designs in the blocks, it creates that really nice secondary design, and that's where the texture itself, really visually, is quite prominent, in the result. Same here.
I like that one.
I do too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it looks like, wow, but it's really not that complicated. But then again, I did draw that out on graph paper ahead of time because it was for a specific project to create hexagon, and there's hexagons within the big hexagon. And so I did draw that out. But yeah, it's predominantly straight lines or lines, not straight lines, but lines in there. So.
Well, you quilted all straight lines. They just appeared.
Right.
They're straight. They're just optically curving. Mm-hmm.
Mostly straight, yeah.
Yeah. I love the contrast of that blue thread too that you used.
Thank you.
Right.
So this is mine. And so, like that one that we just saw, when you look at something like that, the texture is really where it changes direction. It's not really the lines themselves. And so I love that. And somehow, I think because I do a lot of straight lines, you start to be able to understand what's going to happen when you change direction or something. So I love doing this kind of thing where you just mark a line in there. And as you come to it, you bump out and go back to your lines because it added double texture. And really you just stitch the same, it's no harder than just a plain straight line.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably my absolute favorite thing about lines, they give you good texture, but it can also, if you put them in the right way, they're directional, so they can make a viewer's eye go right where you want it because those lines are pointing out and those shapes were, on point. And it's to draw your eye out to the next thing. So, they can be really simple, but also kind of have a purpose, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of those things, right? So it's nothing more than, I just made a shape like this and echoed it and echoed it and echoed it. But when you're done, you can look at it. And I took a bunch of pictures of this. So one way you can see Christmas trees almost, but another way you notice the other shapes that are created, the chevron, it depends on the light.
Do you want me to rotate it? Or will that even change?
Oh, I don't know. I think it was the light, but see how there you don't really see a tree, probably because it's not oriented the way of a tree.
Yeah.
But that to me, that is the most amazing thing that you can quilt something so simple.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not going to say it was fast, but
And it looks so crisp, just so very crisp.
Yeah.
I mean.
But it has that dimension, it looks like it's coming up off the fabric. Mm-hmm.
And that's the changing of the width of the spacing, right? That does that.
No, are they different?
Well, in here they're narrow.
They're
and
tighter on the side.
Wider.
Probably 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch.
Yeah.
And then this one, I used the little feathers as the fill around everything else. But then for the, implied border that I put in there, I needed something that wasn't curvy because every single thing in here is curvy with the feathers. So the lines are perfect. Nothing more than 1/2 inch spaced straight lines. And it's just enough difference from everything else. I think so anyway. And they direct your eye to follow what that border does. So.
Yeah.
And this is another one where it's nothing more than lines, but it's because they switch and change that, then it makes parts of it appear to go out and some back.
Now, did you wash this one?
No.
Did you use a different batting in this one than you did in the green one that we saw earlier with the trees?
I have no idea.
I
Because I just use up whatever I have.
Whatever scrap is right next to the machine.
Yeah, whatever's closest, that's what we're going with. And big
well,
enough.
because maybe it's the way you took the picture. I'm just trying to see, because we were, on the green one, I remarked that it looked very crisp. Whereas this one, I'm guessing that you use different batting because you still
probably
half-inch lines, and there's a difference. And a lot of times that's when I've learned my lesson about what batting to use, because I was disappointed after the fact, that the lines, even though I never go wider than half-inch, I still think it doesn't look as crisp anymore. And then I think I should have used a double bat or different bat.
No. So the thing about lines, and only because some people love that look, of an older quilt. You know what I mean? Like when you, even if you would just meander something, and then if you just wash it and it gets all crinkly, that's awesome if that's what you want. But lines do weird things because they just do. I mean, you're going this way and then maybe you're changing and it does strange things. But if I always wash mine, all of them after, if you don't want that puckery and you block it, it'll look just like it. Perfect. It's, it's kind of a plus and a minus of lines because they make things weird. Yeah. That's why I mark, because if you don't, you're not going to be where you really need to be. But and that's nothing but straight, just lines. Just lines. I marked a stencil, followed the lines, and then added extra ones. And to me, that texture is awesome. Little and big, not planned. I just kind of did it. So, I mean, I don't know.
It's a modern take on the traditional hanging diamonds design.
See, and I see the side of buildings.
And that's what I thought too. It's the texture on this one compared to, again, the tree one is very subtle. It's much more subtle. You have to really look and I'm just trying to see or think if you think of it as a building, how you could have made it so the front peak would have been a little bit more pronounced.
You just would have left out two lines. Only did the center and skipped one, because then it would have been puffier and appeared forward of. But this one, if you turned it on its side, is totally different. So I mean, it
looks like steps.
Well, let's see.
Yeah, now they have to see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a totally different thing.
Instead of turning our heads.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't have that button on my screen, Sharon. I'm like,
everybody together.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to go after Jody. Okay.
Is this Jody's last one?
I don't know, but I don't want to go after Jody. She's like magic with lines.
I know. I have nothing.
But it's my favorite thing.
Look at that.
Yeah, for sure.
So, this is just the same. If you just do something along each line that's different, in this case, it was a curve, changes it all together. I mean, and it looks like those, like there's something under the quilt. You know what I mean?
Is this your new,
it is.
The rulers? Yeah. That is so cool.
I mean, and you could freehand that. easily. I mean, that's a
Consistently?
common shape. Karen, you could definitely freehand it because it's a half of an OG shape, and that's your
Yeah.
thing. So,
Okay.
Now, did you mark the center of that in order to maintain, just like we talked about in the diamonds, the center? No?
no, so I just mark like a, I don't know, I'm going to say 2 inch, like lay a 2 inch roller down and mark the top and the bottom.
To know where the curve starts.
Yeah, because the ruler has, the curve is on the ruler. So you
Okay.
just line it up every time.
Very cool.
You can do it with any shape. It's very cool. And this one, it's just totally random. I might have marked a wavy line, random wavy line. But you just like start and you like just stitch and then turn it a little bit to keep the center so it's on that line.
Mhm.
And it gives you this funky, I love that too.
It's like boomerangs.
And no thought at all. No,
That's my kind of quilting.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I love when you don't have to work too hard.
Yeah. Well, because there's usually other thoughts going on. So if I'm trying to really think on the quilt, something jumps in the way and messes me up. But yeah.
And then this is just lines thrown into random curve,
Mm-hmm.
and it just adds extra. It's just different. So it's not all the same and doesn't
You do
blend.
your
over.
lines first and then come back with your fill?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very cool.
Oh my gosh, why did I put so many in there? But this is another one that I echoed the hexagon shape. And this is what I got. Like I didn't really know what was going to happen, but it turned out to be pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think you really see the hexagon anymore.
Nope.
It becomes those weird, I don't even know what kind of chevron.
It reminds me of like sound waves. I don't know why, but that's what it reminds me of.
Radiating.
I don't know why, but I see pine cones.
Pine cones.
I don't know how. That's the word that comes into my head. I don't know.
But yeah, I could see that.
Oh, the parts of each.
See,
like
Sharon, I
diamond
meant them to be
shape.
pine cones. No.
Okay. I heard pineapples and I'm going, I don't see a damn
Oh,
pineapple.
really? A pine cone.
Pineapple.
Now that makes way more sense.
Do you think, okay, so do you think that your frame of mind determines like how you interpret things that you see in a quilt? Like maybe maybe I'm thinking about camping.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think so.
And it's this like message.
Well, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the brain is crazy. Like if
For sure.
as soon as you buy a red car, that's all you see is red cars.
Yeah.
You know. So
Yeah.
I think it might be just a light,
Could be.
but I don't know.
Now see, I follow Jody. Jody is a line master. I just put some straight lines down in a pattern and then fill them to create wallpaper. So
It looks very cool though. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it
perfect because the contrast with her is like,
yeah,
great. I mean,
well, she's all lines too. They're just squiggly lines, but
I love her hair.
well, the hair was fun because it was curly. But.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I think I'd be scared. I would not quilt a face.
No.
It's not that hard. Well, especially
No.
this way because it's all layers of the same, gradated colors. You just follow the shape of the face.
I can't even imagine what that poor person would look like. No.
No.
Oh, it wasn't that bad. So. And then I feel like I share this every time, but it seems like this fits into almost every episode. But this has all lines, straight lines, except for the feathers and the petals. And they vary in width and density and direction. So it fits. Mm-hmm.
That's like the beauty of it because every single one they look different. Do you know what I mean? But it's really the same thing, but different size or shape or spacing or.
And that wasn't planned. I just said, oh, well, okay, I put them down and traced them, and then the filling was not planned. So that worked in my book. Yeah. So there. Oh, yeah. Side light. If you want to see lines and texture, just use side light. So, and that's just, I mean, it's just framed lines. So there is a little bit, a pattern to it, but I just love that.
Well, and they stand out. I mean, it really breaks it up. Good.
Yeah. And that was, well, Sharon once called scrappy quilt, but it was scrappy in my world. There were like 9 different beiges in there. So, and Sharon uses like 300 beiges, but okay, in my world, this was scrappy.
Yeah. It's a very controlled scrappy.
Yeah.
That's good.
So that's what kind of, oh, this quilt. Yeah. This quilt is all just straight lines in 4 different thread colors for the background. So depending on the color and how wide the straight lines were is where the highlight and the light went to. It was a great idea until I realized how many little raindrops I had to stop and go around.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So you see, they all got skipped. I did all the nice big areas first and then went back and did the little things.
Why do we do that?
I don't know.
I think probably in your head, you probably know I should do all the hard stuff first because then the rest, but I don't.
No. Yeah. And that's super, super slippery satin stuff. So it wasn't even behaving well. Yeah. It's like and I didn't stabilize it at all. Lesson learned. So next one. So this, I love doing this on double wedding rings, and I do it a lot. And I just do the 3 curves around that on one side or 2 sides of the inner ring, but it creates such, I guess, movement more than texture. Okay, I snuck this one in. So it's movement more than texture, but I love doing that, And then the washboard on the outside, that's just my favorite thing because I want to hear that noise.
Well, and I think it's nice in borders because it kind of makes you look in, like it leads you
right in
to the rest of the quilt.
And it's also, if it's a bed quilt, that's where you pull on the quilt the most. So that needs a little bit more quilting anyway. So this was all just crazy swirly feather fills. And then I put these frame shapes in there, these edges shapes. And that's where I used all my straight line because I wanted to keep your eye moving with all this crazy background through the different, not appliques, they're
painted.
Crown or painted. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So as a whole, like if you look at the whole quilt, it probably looks like you're like those lines are like behind everything.
It does. It's
what I mean?
It reminds, and I always talk about, like in my brain, I see it as, when you have the plaster wall and the plaster's peeling off and you see all the lath behind it. That's what my brain thinks of when I do that.
Texture for depth.
Yes.
We need to do that one.
Oh boy. I have a lot of pictures of that. So again, see, that's that same curved thing, but that's the only quilting in that block, just those curved lines. Because we didn't specify straight line, right? I'm much better at curves than I am straight.
Yeah, and I very seldom will you do the curve. It's weird.
Well, because I think with a curve, you can be just a little bit off and you're okay. But with a straight line, it must be straight, continually straight. So, and we know my attention span is not, must be straight, So this was a little experiment. And you see, I did one.
That's a lot of lines.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of mistakes in there, but we won't point them out. But I said, oh, I want to do that twisted log cabin, but I want to stack them. So I had to draw it out entirely because otherwise, once you start quilting, it was just a
too much.
massive mess. But it's still cool, even with
It
those
is.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I
I wouldn't
wonder
want to.
what it would have looked like had you done the center one in a different color.
I thought
That's
about
what
it,
I
but
want to know.
it wasn't worth stitching it again to see.
No,
No,
but
you have to do it again. Do one like with like, I don't know, 3 different, like gradated it up.
no,
Maybe.
I would just do the center because I mean the middle one,
Mm-hmm.
because then it would look totally different in regards to, we were talking about depth just now.
Well,
But if
then you
you
would do the
did,
back one darkest and the middle one mid and the
Medium.
top one lightest. Mhm.
yeah, it'd be popping right out. Or you need to do that in succession because you could do one, every other one could be the opposite. So it could be, and then start with the center one, dark, medium, light.
So they wrote, yeah.
I'm doing that later.
Good, you do that. Because this sample is only, I don't know, I think I started with an 8-inch square.
So everybody that's going to be watching this right now,
Is gonna do that.
don't know. You don't have to do it. Jody's going to do it.
Oh, wait, we're going to have a challenge announcement. Everybody do a
You're
stack.
going to see that on the next episode.
Well, because it's not continual. One goes this way, one goes this way, and then one goes this way. So
Right.
Yeah, forget it. I'm not doing it.
Yeah. And I'm really good at flipping things. And my brain still stopped and said, "What are you expecting of me?"
Well, that line goes behind the previous one. You would have to mark every single
I have to mark every single one.
one.
Yeah.
And even that, see Sharon, right? Look, I'm trying to move my screen. Right around between 3 and 4 o'clock on the right-hand side. See where I didn't keep that curve?
Here.
Yep, right there. And that's just jumps out at me. And up on the top. Yeah, I missed the stitch sideways for some strange reason. Don't know why. But yeah, not enough for me to do it again, rip it out, fix it. No, it was just I wanted to try something.
Well, you learn something new every
No,
time.
it works. It's just
right?
a lot of work.
It was a lot of work for this little tiny 8-inch block. So this is a client quilt. And she had saw something, she created this thing and she wanted it to look like all these bubbles going up behind. And I'm like, yeah, well, I need more than just bubbles. So I just used straight lines between some of the bubbles to create just that difference in depth.
That's cute.
Yeah.
Is she happy with it?
She's very happy with it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Pretty.
Yeah.
Looks pretty big.
It was long. It was like 60 long by only like this wide. So it got loaded sideways. So. And this was my quilt Glacier 2, which I listened to Jody and I marked every single line and it works. Everything's perfect and spaced and done. Yeah.
Did you mark all of the stuff on the inside, the white too?
I marked the broken glass too, only to keep my sanity.
Okay.
And I'm glad I did because this is when I broke my ankle. So I had started quilting it, broke my ankle, and a lot happened between then and then. And I probably would have changed my mind on some of the things. But I'm like, no, stay with those lines.
Yeah.
Which at that point were starting to disappear.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I like that. Well, it makes it mindless when you mark it.
Oh yeah, you just follow. It's like coloring. You're just filling, coloring, stitching along what's already there, tracing it.
Yeah.
So here are my pictures. I honestly went into looking for pictures of things with lines and thought I have nothing to. I don't quilt with a lot of straight lines, but I realized that I use them as a kind of a supporting actor, I guess. Like they're not the star of the show usually. But then I was like, oh, I actually use lines quite a bit. And I found all these pictures that I haven't seen in a while. So it'd be kind of fun for you guys, for people at home to do that too. Just to realize, okay, I'm actually doing this. I'm using lines. This is Anita Shackelford's Modern Set Curve, or I can't remember what it's called. but it's that curvy modern lines. And so I used it as a background texture for the trees behind the focus of the owl, just to give like a little bit of movement. I wanted the trees to almost look like there's maybe a little bit of a breeze in there. And yeah, so I was really happy how that turned out, because a lot of times you don't know how to quilt panels. Like, would you outline all the branches? Like, obviously I chose some foreground elements that I wanted to separate, and I quilted, outlined the bird and this main branch that the owl's sitting on, but everything else I just wanted to kind of not compete with it. So lines are great.
Those are great with the trees.
Yeah.
I was really happy with that. Yeah, I really liked and I was able to audition it in Creative Studio too, bring in the picture of the panel, and then I put that design over. And as soon as I did that, I was like, oh, there's my visual.
Yeah,
that's what I need to do on the owl. So that's a little bit more of a close up of
nice.
Some fun on that. That's my mom's quilt. So I think there is birds in the background too, and you can still see them overall, but
but they're back. They should be back. Yeah.
Yeah. So
because if you had traced around those two, they would have came all the way forward, and that
exactly. Yeah, and a lot of more work too.
Yeah. Triple stitch.
Yes, I love the little triple stitch. I thought of you when I found this picture, and I was like, oh, Karen, the little triple stitch. But this picture isn't just about the little triple stitch here, which is this piano key back here, but it's also about using lines to separate the spaces, because I find that I do that quite a bit, just to like make channels and divide things so that there's breaks in between one section and another. And the other thing that it does in really, really big borders, like things with like wide open space where there really isn't a border, it's just this big, huge honking space, is you can make borders by using lines to break them up. So put a fake border or a frame in there where there wasn't one. So that's another way that I like to use the lines. But yeah, the triple stitch is really pretty. I think it's really elegant.
Yeah.
And it makes those little bars really pop.
Yeah. And here's another one. And again, I've got all these pictures with lines, but I typically didn't think that I used much line work in my quilting. I found a bunch. So, and different directions and different widths. There's 1/4 of an inch spacing here, 1/2 inch spacing here. So kind of like, and even down to matchstick spacing in those sections there. So kind of, I guess just echoing what everybody else has already said about like the direction changes and the spacing and stuff, and it can create all this really neat stuff.
And it is that is the easiest way to pull your eye across the quilt, because your eye will follow that line.
Yeah, for sure. I got a couple of pictures of this one, but this is a really close-up one so that you can actually see. I did this really recently. It's a flower pots quilt where basically these were appliqued down on top of this gray one big piece of fabric underneath. And I knew I was going to do something kind of swirly inside the round, that like, I guess they're postcard. They're a bit bigger than postcard size. But then if I went all the way up to the edge with that, what would I put in the background here? That still needed to be quilted down. If I left it unquilted, it would kind of poof up a bit. So I did 1/4 of an inch line spacing in the whole background. And you can see where she's got the pots that are all angled slightly differently. And so I did, I did use my channel locks to make sure that my lines stayed nice and straight as I went through it. And it just created a really nice, like, frame to the pots themselves, the flower pot blocks themselves, and then as well as going around some of the border stitching. The straight lines are just such a nice way to show off your feature quilting. So that's a picture of the quilt before it was quilted. It was supposed to be a quilt after it was quilted, but I guess I didn't have my glasses on. But yeah, you can see how, like, if I would have left that unquilted and quilted these down densely, then this would pop right up. So it's just a really simple way to quilt a small irregular space. All of these shapes are like weird spaces. So sometimes it's hard to figure out what to put in them.
And channel locks were good, because otherwise you'd have nothing to go straight off of.
Yeah, because there's constant breaks in between all of the little sections. So yeah. This is before quilting, a quilt called, I think it was called Spectrum, that I quilted for a customer. And I really struggled with an idea to put on this one, but I went back to the modern set curve pattern, but I did it in 2 directions. So I did it one direction going across the quilt, and then I turned the quilt and I did it in the opposite direction. So it gave a really warped kind of look, but then I left the interior rings unquilted. So I did a bunch of stopping and starting.
Mm-hmm. It's like a warped grid. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That is cool.
And I needed something that was going to stay modern, but as well as stabilize all of the piecing, because this is all strip pieced inside there.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of seams too.
It's a lot of seams. Yeah. So there's a look with that. I did stitch something inside those rings, but as you can see, like, you got good coverage and stability to the quilts. It can actually be used, even though it's custom quilted, because it touches all of the patches and really stabilizes everything. So I love that overall.
Oh yeah, you got that going on.
Totally warped. And then I didn't have to think about something different for every ray of color that went out. That would have been, I mean, don't get me wrong, it was enough work as it is to, get that design in the different sections to, go as continuous and stopping and starting. But I kind of thought it was worth it. Yeah. And there's the side light Karen was talking about.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yes.
Yeah. I was happy with that one. And that's all my pictures that I have. I had more pictures of the same quilt than different exampls. So
when you had mentioned you go through your pictures, I find it funny every time we have to pull pictures for something, because I do the same thing. I'm like, whoa, I was on like this little kick of this back then, or I did this. It's neat to look through your old pictures of your own stuff,
Yeah. And I think there's things that we do without really realizing it or thinking it. I mean, when you've been quilting for a good amount of time, some of the things that to us feel intuitive, and then when other people are asking questions about how do you do that, and you look back and go, okay, well, there is an actual process for some of that, and a thought that goes in behind, why did you put lines there, or why did you combine this and that, right? So.
I like when you didn't know you were doing something good, but now that you know things, you know that you did something good back then. You're like, I was ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Good guess. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess that brings us to the end of this episode, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.